Hey, my name is TJ. I'm a young person in long-term recovery, and for me, that means I haven't had a drink or a drug since August 9th, 2016. I am here hosting the Recovery Matters podcast today with our guest.
Hi, I'm Jillian. I'm person in long-term recovery as well. My clean day is February 23rd of 21, and I also work for CCAR. I'm a recovery coach in the emergency department.
What made you want to become a recovery coach?
It was actually funny. I had never heard about recovery coaches, and I was sitting in rehab, and we had an intern, and he was talking about CCAR and recovery coaching, and I remember sitting there, and I was like, "That's it. That's what I want to do." And I put it on my goals list, and 17 months later, I interviewed with CCAR.
Good for you.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
really cool.
it was really awesome.
So you've been sober or clean a little while right now.
Mhm.
Recovery's been rocking.
Yep,
Stuff.
recovery's rocking for sure.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about it.
Um, it took me quite a while to get into recovery.
Okay.
And when I did finally get into recovery, I did about 7 months in treatment. I was homeless at the time. I had no job, and it was like, what am I rushing through treatment for? I signed myself up for anything I could get myself into. And I had about 7 or 8 months, and I moved into sober living, and I've been there good 2.5, almost 3 years. And finally, it was time to move on. So I just left sober living.
Good for you. I totally get it where you're kind of talking about that, like sign me up for anything.
Hmm.
I've been in that situation and like I should try to be the picky choosy person.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
I'll go here, we won't go here. And I remember like that last day trying to get me into a bed
Hmm.
and I was like, I'm only going to Rushford. And they were like, no, you're going anywhere where we can get you
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, that was me. I had dead set on Carnes Weeks in Torrington. That was really the only place that I knew I wanted to go to. And my backup, unfortunately was Stonington. And so I was nervous, but it came down to the line. I was gonna go into a one of those sobering centers and wait for a bed, and a bed opened up like the day I was supposed to leave. So it's crazy. Like my recovery journey has truly been like things falling in place when they're supposed to fall in place,
Yes.
and seeing God's plan, even though I haven't been sure like what that path was going to be, everything has fallen into place when it was supposed to.
It's kind of like you becoming a recovery coach,
Yeah.
right? So you talk about it and it's like, it almost seems impossible
Hmm.
that first time you put pen to paper, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, okay, this is my goal, but where do I even start?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And I definitely, I remember I'd always look at the CCAR website, and there were no openings. And I was like, yeah, this really isn't going to happen. And I was working at a treatment center,
Yep.
and I had a really bad night there. And I was like, this isn't what I want for my life and for my recovery. Um, and I had gone onto CCAR's website, and the applications had opened. And I had about a day to get my application in before the deadline closed. And I remember sitting there that night and doing my resume and doing my cover letter, and just sent it in on a whim to see if I would even hear back. And sure enough, like a week later, I did.
Yep. Yeah, I thought I wanted to work in treatment and stuff like
Mm,
that. And cause like I always did well in treatment, right?
yeah,
Like it was like a same thing in prison, right? Like I did well in prison, right? I got
yeah,
a job. And like I'm kind of charismatic and like I
right.
get into that like, and you'd make friends and like do
Hmm.
shit together kind of thing and like and it was so easy like I could stay sober in treatment,
Yeah,
but like I couldn't stay sober on the outside.
right,
And that
right.
was the whole part of recovery for me, right?
Hmm.
Tell me about going to treatment. So it's like boom, bed opens up. Are you happy? You
Yeah.
excited? What?
I was, my addiction really wasn't that long. It was only a couple of years, but I lost everything,
Yep.
including my children, so
Okay.
quickly. So it like was a blink of an eye that I was at rock bottom pretty fast. And by the time I finally was ready to go to treatment, I was going to take any bed they had, but I knew I wanted to get as far away as possible um, from the Hartford area, because that, is where I ran. And I'm like, if I go to, one of these detoxes in Hartford, I'm just going to walk out.
Hmm.
I know where to go. I know where I am. I needed to put myself in an uncomfortable position as far away as possible.
Yep.
So I went to Stonington, and it's way out there, there's nothing, and I was like, "If I leave, no one's coming to get me." I'm walking, 30 miles plus down to Foxwoods to maybe try and get a ride from somebody.
Yep.
So I knew I had no choice but to stay, and I was just so broken and ready at that point that it's like it just kinda happened, and I was like, "I'm just done." I just woke up one morning and I was done, and I had been calling and, no beds and like, try tomorrow," and then finally, I think it was like a Monday, they finally had a bed, and I was just pulled the trigger, I was ready.
And you were on your way.
Yeah, I called my mom and, who was so beyond, fed up with me at that point, that, she always said, "If you're ready to go to treatment, call me. Other than that, don't call me. I'm not giving you
Nice.
money. I'm not giving you a place to stay, but if you're ready to really get help, in treatment, I'll come and get you." And, she did. She did, and she even bought me cigarettes, and I remember
Nice.
being so excited because she bought me Dunkins and cigarettes, and I was like, "Whoa, this is really weird," because, she was so not like that, but I
Yep.
think she also felt like this was different this time, you
Yeah.
know?
She knew something, like the gears
Yeah.
were turning. So you get to treatment,
Mhm.
you settling in,
Yep.
you're like, I'm gonna ride this thing.
Yeah.
I wanna get sober.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought I was gonna die in detox, honestly.
Okay.
So I detoxed, cold turkey, no methadone, no Suboxone, and I remember feeling like I was gonna die.
Yep.
And there was one night, and I was not a person who prayed. I had no belief in God, which is something I had struggled with mostly my entire childhood. And I remember laying there and I was like, God, if you just let me live through tonight, like if I survive tonight, I will hit the ground running and I will take this recovery thing as far as I can go. Because I was like, my heart's going to blow up, or I'm just, I've done so much damage to my body at this point. I think I was like 80 pounds. I mean, I'm small as it is, but 80 pounds was just, there was nothing to me. And I really thought that I was going to die. And sure enough, I woke up the next morning still feeling like shit, but I was like, all right, bet.
Yep.
Let's do this, you know?
That's really cool. I had the same exact experience. I was sitting in
Yeah.
Rushford in the middle of the summer and no methadone, no
Yep.
Suboxone, nothing, and being so sick.
So sick.
Maybe 120,
Mhm.
140 pounds soaking wet. I'm 230,
Yeah.
225 today, give or take, right? Like, just for
Mhm.
perspective, 100 pounds less and,
Yeah.
like, arms black and blue from shooting dope and,
Mhm.
like, miserable. And, like, the nurses come in and I'm, like, the biggest dick ever and, like, laying in bed and, like, won't take my
Yep.
slippers off in bed. Like, I'm,
Okay.
like, in bed with slippers on, just, like, grimy, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep, I remember it well. I
And
remember it well.
making that like that, man, I will literally never do this ever
Yeah.
again in my entire life.
Yeah.
Being so miserable and fed up and like
Mhm.
so sick and just like that, like those thoughts that go through your head, like, how could I ever let it get
Yeah.
this far?
Yeah. Yeah, I
You
mean,
know?
I had gotten, a bad batch, and my hands were swollen about 3 times the size of normal and, just red and raw and, same thing, bruises up and down my arms and my legs, and I had that same exact feeling, like, "How did I get here?"
Hmm.
I went from being a single mom of 2 kids and raising them and, doing talent show costumes and working full time, and within, a matter of, I think it was 2 months of getting on heroin, everything was gone.
Yep.
And it was like, how did I get here? How did I lose everything that I used to stand for
Hmm.
and end up in this position?
Yep. And like you and going through that pain and that and then like waking up that next day, you're
Mhm.
like, I'm ready.
Yeah,
So you go from detox at Stonington to the
yeah.
treatment center at Stonington.
No, so I was lucky enough I got to go to Carnes Weeks. I went
Okay.
straight into Carnes, and I did 30 days there. Probably one of the it was the only time I'd ever been in rehab, but probably one of the best experiences I've had in recovery.
It's really cool.
I met my counselor who is still my therapist to this day. The woman is an angel on this
Wow.
earth. I started intensive trauma therapy
Mhm.
and um yeah, I stayed there for a month and then I went into their women's only program. And I was like, this is crazy. I'm going to be living with 8 women
Mhm.
in a small house, 4 to a bedroom.
Phew.
And I'm like, it's got to be bunk beds. Like I was envisioning like bunk beds, like jail or something like
Yeah.
that. It was pretty close. But, I did 7 months there, and it was like, again, it reminds me of, like, I will never do this again. I will never go back to these programs. I will never live with 8 women again.
Mhm.
But it was an amazing experience, and I needed it, and like I said, earlier, being homeless and having no job, it was like, "What am I rushing?"
Yep. Where
Take
you
the
gotta
time.
go.
Yeah, where? Where am
Yeah.
I going? You know?
Yeah, I remember, like, calling my sponsor and,
Mhm.
a lot of my friends from detox, it's like, "Yo, yeah, like, y'all gotta come and get me, da, da, da,
Yeah.
like, I promise I'll do meetings, I'll do anything," and they're like, "Where you gotta go?
Yeah, yep.
Like, what's the like," and, like, I ended up leaving there and doing IOP, and I'd been sober ever since, right? Like,
Mhm.
multiple pathways. I mean, I had done, like, a
Yeah.
lot of treatment in prison and all that type of stuff before in the programs and
Mhm.
everything, right? I had been in IOP for the first time at, like, 13, 14.
Yeah.
And like, at that point, I really like for me, I was like, I had to do it.
Right.
It's like I could talk the game, I could do whatever, but like I needed action in my
Mhm.
life. And that's what changed it.
Yeah, yeah, it was unfortunate for me that I got it too late, as far as
Okay.
the custody of my children was concerned.
Yep.
I was just too little too late. I actually signed my rights over my first week in rehab.
That's
And
tough.
yeah, and I remember sitting there and being like, is this going to send me back out? Like, what is it? What That's not going to do anything. That's just going to make everything worse. Like, going out and getting high isn't going to solve a single thing that I'm dealing with right now. Um, but it was definitely the hardest day of my life, having to sit there and be like, I am not good for these kids. I can't take care of them. This has been dragged out for about 4 years now at this point, 3 or 4 years, and I'd done nothing but show them that I was an unreliable parent and a drug addict.
Hmm.
So, it wasn't like, "Oh, hey, I'm in rehab now, like, let's, give me another chance." It was just too little, too late.
Yeah. And like you had to go through like the healing process
Yeah.
with that and stuff. And like the
Yeah.
other part too is like rebuilding your life and,
Mhm.
and that whole aspect. And like, you know, like you had to learn how to live sober,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I had to learn, I started using drugs, pretty early. I think I started experimenting about 14.
Hmm.
Um, I had, a wonderful childhood with my mother and my stepfather. With my biological dad, it was nothing but trauma and rejection.
Hmm.
Um, and, at age 12, there was a really traumatic event involving my father, that kind of sent me on the downward spin. And, I was sexually assaulted for the first time when I was 15, and that was just a downward. And by 17, I was a full blown drug addict.
Yep.
So in my life, and then I became a mom. So in my life, I had been nothing but a drug addict, a mom, and then back to being a drug addict. So it was like, who am I? Who am I without the drugs? Who am I without my children? And how do I heal years and years of trauma that have never been dealt with? I was very, very much like I stuff it down, and that's
Yep.
how I deal with things. I stuff it and I keep going. But after years of doing that, and then having mental health issues that were undiagnosed. I was on all the wrong meds.
Yep.
I was in a psychosis for a couple months that I didn't realize until I finally came out of it. Like, oh my God, like even today, there's months I don't remember in my life
Hmm.
from being in like such a mental psychosis.
Hmm.
So it was a lot to have to heal everything and figure out who I was in recovery, and that I no longer was a mom. Like, I'll always be a mom, but I no longer had children that I was taking care of, so who was I?
Yep.
Yep.
And learn who you were. And like when you're kind of telling the story, makes me think of like I would go to see whatever therapist or whatever
Mhm.
type of person. It's like, what do you got? It's like, I got anxiety and depression and this and
Yeah.
that. And like, it's like nothing's treated properly because I do cocaine, I do
Right.
heroin, I do
Yeah.
whatever. So it's like, I drink alcohol every day. Like, of course I have anxiety. Like, nothing
Mhm.
can be treated properly. And it was the same thing. And they asked me that at detox and like trying to talk to you about whatever. And it's like, I need to get on that. Da, da, da. And they're like, dude, like, you've been running.
Yeah.
Like, you like, can we do an intake, please? And it's like, you
Yeah.
don't even know if you have whatever because,
Mhm.
like, a side effect of alcohol use disorder is anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
You're detoxing from heroin. Guess
Yeah.
what? Anxiety and depression are the number one symptoms, right? And
Yeah.
like all these things, like you can't even be treated properly, and like, and then you end up on a medication that's not even the right thing for you. And like,
Mhm.
for me, like I'd convinced myself I needed all of these things for so long, and then like I get sober and like go through post-acute withdrawal and get better, and it's like I did, there are certain people who like do need,
Mhm.
medication and that type of stuff, but like proper treatment is until like you're off of all the crazy,
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I had my first psych hospital stay. I believe it was around the age of 14, 15. It was right
Yep.
after I was sexually assaulted, and they threw around diagnosis and put
Mhm.
me on a bunch of
You
meds.
didn't tell them what was going on with you?
No, so I kept it a secret. I was there for a good month and I kept it a secret for a while, and then finally broke down and told my counselor, and then we told my parents because my parents had no clue, and I
Yep.
didn't tell anybody. The shame and the guilt and everything that comes with being sexually assaulted was just too much for me.
Mhm.
And they were like, no wonder, I was self-harming at that point.
Yep.
And once I finally came out and told them, and they looked at my past and kind of the trauma I had been through with my father as well, they were like, no wonder. Like, no wonder she's a mess. No wonder she's all over the place and self-harming and, drinking and smoking pot. And, um, they put me on some meds and I did well for a little bit. And then, of course, I just stopped taking the meds. As soon as I would feel, oh, I feel good, I'm like, I don't need them anymore. And then would
Mhm.
regress backwards, and when I found, drugs, I was like, not only did it make me fit in at school and, finally have like a group,
Mhm.
but it made me feel good. And I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. And I remember thinking that when I found heroin, it was like, aha, like,
This is it.
this is it. This quiets all that noise in my
Mhm.
head. It shuts down all that negative thoughts I had in my life and in running through my head. And all that trauma was just gone. Like there was just nothing. And that's what I had been searching for basically my entire life, was
Yep.
that nothingness.
Heroin was the answer,
Yeah, it
right?
was.
It became the solution till it became the problem.
Right. Absolutely.
Are you ready to make a difference in the lives of others? If so, then you should consider becoming a recovery coach. Recovery coaches are trained to help people in recovery, seeking recovery, or struggling with addiction. They provide support, guidance, and resources to help people on their recovery journey. CCAR Training is the leading provider of recovery coach training programs. Our programs are designed to teach you the skills and knowledge, what we call the science, while giving you an understanding of your own art needed to be a successful recovery coach. We offer a variety of training options, most offered online. If you're interested in becoming a recovery coach or just learning more, I encourage you to visit our website or contact us today. We would be happy to answer any questions you have and help you get started on your journey to becoming a recovery coach. We hope you'll visit us at www.addictionrecoverytraining.org to learn more.
Like you do that heroin for the first time and you're like, wow, like this is
Hmm.
it, right?
Yeah.
And then like it just like for me, like eventually, like once I got going on like the true pathway, like
Hmm.
it wasn't a problem right away. Like
Yeah.
there were small issues in my life. I don't want to say small issues, but I want to say issues in my life, but like I was able to like keep things under wrap.
Hmm.
It wasn't until you lose the first job,
Yeah.
you lose the relationships, you lose like, it's like your parents are up all night fucking worried about you,
Yeah.
right? Like those types of things. And then for me, like at that point, like entering rehab for the first time at 18,
Hmm.
doing the detox and being in there and everybody being like, get it now, kid, get it
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I say that to clients that I
Yeah.
coach, recoveries that I coach in the hospital that are young. I'm like, let's get it now. You don't want to be 60, 70 dealing with this and on Medicare, and,
Yep.
facilities are not wanting to take Medicare, and like, let's get it now. But, at the same time, it's everyone's journey. I mean, I think I was 29 or 30 the first time I went into treatment.
Okay.
Um, and, for me, when I started heroin, it was within months. The car was gone, the job was
Yep.
gone, my children were gone. My significant other at the time was incredibly abusive and violent. And so it was the two of us living in this world of violence and drug use. And, he was the one who shot me up for the first time. He
Yep.
introduced me to needles. I had never even considered honestly heroin before him, never mind, sticking a needle in my arm. That had never crossed my mind.
Hmm.
Um, and it just spiraled so quickly. I
Yeah.
think back now and I'm like, damn, there was no like long progression of like slowly it happening. It was just like one thing after the other.
Yep. I think like for me, the second I was to like break skin, like the
Hmm.
second I introduce, it's like I got a 90-day time. Like that's it. Like every time
Yeah.
I've ever went on a period of like IV drug use, like I
Hmm.
am incarcerated 90 days, like both
Okay.
back to
Yeah.
back.
Hmm.
It's like all right, and then boom, and like
Yeah.
wake up, and it's like damn it,
Damn it again. I know. I
Yeah.
got very lucky. I had quite a few criminal charges, but I, was able to get on probation. But
Yep.
I remember I was looking at about 10 years in Niantic and I was like, what? They're going to eat me alive. Like, I thought I was big and bad and tough, in the drug world and running
Yeah.
around Hartford. Like, I was tough.
Hmm.
And I was like, they're going to eat me alive.
Hmm.
They're absolutely going to kill me in there. And I
Yeah.
was terrified.
And you were able to make it through with like the recovery,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I struggled on the probation. I was very lucky that it was very unsupervised probation, because I continued my drug use.
Yep.
And I got out of a lot of things because I was pregnant at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, and my last pregnancy, I used my whole pregnancy.
Phew.
And by the grace of God, my son was born unaddicted, perfectly fine, beautiful, healthy baby.
Nice.
But DCF took him right from the hospital. But I was still on probation until I went into rehab. And I think it was like a couple weeks in, I went online, the court case lookup, and I checked myself and I was like, oh my God, like the cases are gone. The AR like took all the charges away and I found out I was off probation and they had tried to violate me, but I was in treatment. I didn't register that I had changed addresses because obviously when I left, my significant other at the time, I left the address and I didn't tell anybody because I was trying to hide from him and,
Hmm.
moved, to Torrington for treatment. And they did try to violate me for not saying where I was, but thank God I was in a treatment center and they were kind of like, oh, all right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. We'll let her
Yeah.
pass on this one,
Yeah.
you know?
Things work out, right?
Yeah, yeah, they do.
So you go into Carnes Weeks and you go into the 7-month
Mhm.
program, get out and go into sober living.
Yep,
So you're about 8 months sober and sober living?
yep, I moved in at about 8 months, when I got my first job at Planet Fitness.
Nice.
Yeah, yep, and, never someone who's never been to the gym in their life, but it was, walking distance from the sober house, and I
Yep.
used to walk there all hours of the day and night and work, and, then working at the treatment center fell in my lap. A friend of mine worked there and was like, "Hey, we're hiring," like, I'm like, "Psh, I got, like, 8, 9 months sober at this point, there's no way they're gonna hire me." And they did, and my mom and, her husband were great, gracious enough to gift me a car.
Nice.
Yeah, it was my stepbrother's at the time. It was his car and they were going to be passing. So they were swapping cars around and they were like, instead of turning this one in, why don't we give this to Jill? Because this treatment center was an opportunity to build a career.
Yeah.
Instead of just Planet Fitness, which served its purpose, paid my bills, first job out of treatment, first job I had held in
Mhm.
who knows how long because of my addiction, so it was
They're
a
actually
starting
pretty
point.
recovery friendly over there.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they donated a bunch of stuff to the place in a treatment center right in Wyndham,
Okay.
re-
Okay.
which is really cool.
Yeah, yeah, I remember telling my manager because, of course, I had the gap of
Yes.
history, and she's like, "So, what have you been doing for the last, like, 5 or 6 years?" And I was like, "Well, I was a drug addict, this is me." And I remember she didn't even, like, stumble. It was just like, "Oh, okay, like, good for you, I'm so glad you're sober and, like, doing what you need to do." And within a day, they offered me the job, and I was so gung ho for it,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then, so starting to work at the treatment center,
Mhm.
you knew like this is for you. You were kind of like, I kind of want to
Yeah.
explore something else.
So I really loved it at first. I really gained confidence working there.
That's cool.
But coming from a state-run facility where we cleaned our own toilets, we had if the chef wasn't there, we made the food ourselves, and it was usually Stouffer's.
Hmm.
And this was a private facility, and it was, the standards, the rules, what was acceptable went against everything that I believe recovery stands for.
Okay.
No accountability, and it started clashing with my own morals. And that's when I started saying, this has been great. I was running groups and that really gave me that confidence and showed me what I wanted to do. But I also knew the population that I wanted to work for
Mm-hmm.
and with was the homeless people on the streets. Like, I want those recoveries, working with people who come from trust funds and, had really their bottoms weren't my bottom. And so it was very hard to connect with them because, again, their bottom's not my bottom. And not that anyone's bottom is the same, but knowing, someone who's homeless that has nothing, like I was there. I did that. I can relate to that. I can show them like this is what recovery looks like. That was what became important to me.
Yep.
And that's when I started looking into CCAR.
That's really cool.
Hmm.
And then you ended up here, and you've been here for
Yeah. I just had my 2 years.
nice.
Yeah. Yep.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah. It's been wonderful.
That's awesome. And then you were still in sober living for a while too.
Hmm. Yeah. I stayed for about 3 years. My landlord was amazing. He's also in recovery. I got very blessed with roommates, and it served its purpose. It gave me that structure. I still had that accountability coming out of treatment, but I definitely had reached the point where it was like, okay, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready to step out on my own. I'm ready to not have, someone hovering over me and making sure I'm following rules.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely played its purpose. And I'm so beyond blessed that he even gave me a chance because he didn't know me from Adam and didn't need to give me a chance, but he
Yep.
did, and it really, I think, helped save my life.
It's amazing. Tell me about some cool recovery stuff going on in your life today.
So I'm a little different when it comes to recovery. I'm not an AANA person.
Okay.
My recovery is centered around therapy and my medication management.
Nice.
Um, I just moved in with my mom and I'm saving money to hopefully buy my first place.
It's
So,
awesome.
yeah, another milestone in recovery. But it's really, this last year has really been about getting reconnected with my family and building those bonds stronger. And trying to make up for all the lost time I have. I just moved my little brother into college the other day.
Nice.
And I was like, so at one point, I'm like, here I am, waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning on my day off. This is not what I want to be doing, lugging his stuff in. And then it hit me, and it was like, I missed out on this for years.
You get to do
I
this.
get to do this. He asked me to do this for him and with him. And it really makes you look at things differently. As much as I was grumbling about being up bright and early on a Sunday, it was like, wow, like I get to do this. I get to be a part of my brother's life today, whereas I missed out on so many years from my addiction that we didn't know who each other was anymore,
Yeah.
So it was a blessing,
Yeah.
definitely a blessing.
That's really cool. Keep going. Tell me what else.
Um, I just went on a really nice vacation with my mom.
Nice. Where'd you guys
Yes,
go?
we went to St. John's.
Okay.
First vacation in probably 10 years.
How about that?
Yep. And it was just the two of us, and we reconnected and bonded and spent the whole week just together. And I think that's also been great about moving in with her is we're reconnecting. And I moved out when I got kicked out at 16. So, that was the first time. And then I moved out when I was 17, and then I moved back in briefly, and then I moved out permanently at like 19 when I got pregnant with my oldest.
Mhm.
And so I had been out of the house for years. So now living together, it's like we're making up for that lost time. And she's showing me, it's weird, but she's showing me how to be an adult.
Yep.
She's showing me how to cook again and like different recipes. And we make dinner together every night. And she's showing me how to budget and save money coming from someone who just spends like it's their job. And so we've really had this great time to reconnect with each other. Spent a lot of time with my grandmother as well,
Nice.
and unfortunately and fortunately, my grandfather passed before my addiction got bad,
Mhm.
which I'm grateful for because I know it would have killed him.
Yep.
But at the same time, I wish he could see me now. And I
Yeah.
wish he could see the life that I built for myself in recovery.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
If you had to give somebody who's out there struggling right now one piece of advice or something from your life or your story that you want to share with them, what would that be?
To do it before it's too late. I think there's a lot of resources out there, especially for women with children, that I didn't take advantage of. And I wish I did. And had I probably would still have my children.
Mm-hmm.
So the women out there who are struggling and maybe don't think they can do recovery, don't think they can do treatment because they have children. Like there are resources out there. Um, and there's ways to get yourself better without, losing your kids.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's so scary to make that decision to get help for anybody, to just pull that trigger and be like, this is it. But I can honestly say you'll never regret it.
Yep.
You'll never regret making that choice and putting yourself in an uncomfortable position to get yourself healthy and in recovery. You're never going to regret that.
No, that's amazing. And you're amazing. And
Thank
thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, you did so awesome.
Thank you.
Of course.